G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today we're going to be comparing the Centurion Action 10 and the Strv 81 as premiums in the British tech tree. They both sit at rank 4, they're both 6.7, they both have the same gun and are built on the same hull. Well, somewhat. It's the Centurion hull, but there's very, very slight differences. Now, both of these tanks are incredibly similar. But what we're going to do today is have a look at the differences and note how that plays out in gameplay. The Centurion Action 10 features a revised turret that has slightly different weak spots, and in fact, I would argue that it has more weak spots. The Centurion Action 10 has the same reload, the same mobility, and basically the same everything, except armor. It kind of looks like an FV4202, and if you compare it to the one that I'm driving right past right now, it looks incredibly similar. So you would be forgiven for thinking that the armor is equivalent to the FV4202, but in War Thunder, you would be wrong. Apparently it's the same IRL. I found a couple of blogs that say exactly that, but I don't really know, and I don't really want to go off too many things. I really don't want to make a statement on that, and honestly, I just want to focus on how it works in the game. If it gets changed, then my opinions would likely change of it, because the FV4202 is an extremely solid tank, and honestly, the only thing that it lacks is hull armor, and obviously that weak spot on the top of the turret. It's got that little sort of forehead area that sort of really lets it down, but honestly, that's kind of the same for all of the Centurions. Now, I'd like to go over the gameplay and show you exactly how I play the Centurion Action 10. You can see that I've gone for a bit of a flanking role here. We're on, I believe it's El Alamein, and it is the sort of southern area. And you can see that I'm going to engage a couple of targets at range. I'm not really going to take the shot because I don't have a clear shot on them. I'm going to wait for them to expose a little bit more of that hull or something that I can absolutely, for certain, do some damage on. And you can see I managed to shoot what looks to me like a Bachatelion 25T. And it doesn't do a whole lot of damage, to be honest. I am using the Sabo shell because I'm a pleb, and I insist on using APDS because I don't want to have to aim at targets like, I don't know, the Lorraine 40T or the AMX, was it the AMX 50? One of them. The AMX M4 as well sometimes bounces stuff, so I would rather just use a one shell pens all and absolutely not have to deal with switching shells. I also found that the Centurion Action 10 tends to use weird ammo rack placement. It's just got this weird sort of setup. You've got an ammo rack that's definitely in the front, and it's pretty much almost always going to be there, and you don't really have a lot of ammunition in the hull. You can see I took a licking there from what looks like a Tiger 2, and I got really lucky there. It's extremely rare in the Centurion Action 10 that you bounce more than one shot, especially from a long 88, and I would consider the long 88 to be the Action 10's worst enemy. It, in my opinion, is probably the best gun at its tier. Honestly, I would say that because it just has the damage output, it has the rate of fire that's appropriate to its tier. It's just an outstanding gun, and honestly, I don't see many guns that are much better in terms of rate of fire and damage output. Sure, the Centurion has a stabilizer, it's got higher penning rounds, but it doesn't have the damage output that the King Tiger has. You can very easily one-shot a Centurion with a King Tiger, but you can't do the reverse very easily at all. And that's what I like about the Long 88, and find a little bit frustrating about the Centurion Action 10. You constantly have to go and pick your targets apart, and this is the same with the Strv 81. There's no difference. It has the same gun. In fact, it has the same reload. It's extremely similar. These two tanks are highly similar. They differ in two ways. One is a bundle premium, the other is a Golden Eagle premium, and the turret. And of course the ATGMs, but honestly, I'm going to discount the ATGMs for now, because I don't really want to consider the ATGMs as something that, I think it's something extra, and it gives it a little bit of uniqueness, and I think it gives it a little bit extra meme value, if you will. I don't really think, of course, you can use them for long-range engagements, you can use them to pen the hull of King Tigers, of the Mouse. But honestly, I don't really see it as something that makes it amazingly competitive. I just see it as something added to the tank to give it a little bit of extra flavor. And that's what we're going to consider it today. So, with the FE4202, you would expect, it would have decent armor, and the FE4202 does. It looks like the same turret. It actually really does. And you would think that. But you would be wrong. This turret is a lot weaker than the FV4202s currently in game, and it is quite substantially so, to the point where a Panzer IV can very easily pen some of the armor on the cheeks. That's quite a setback. That's a huge setback, in fact. I would consider the Centurion Action 10's turret to be the worst Centurion turret, even worse than the Centurion 1, simply because if you wiggle the Centurion 1's turret, you can stop Panzer IV shells. You can even give the T-34-85 a hard time. But there's no escaping from the Centurion Action 10. The shell on the Centurion, on the T-34-85, for example, can penetrate most of the turret. There are only a couple of cases where it's not going to be able to pen, and they're kind of few and far between because you don't see T-34-85s. You see King Tigers. You see T-54s. You see incredibly powerful guns. And this is stuff that the Centurion Action 10 just never really sees. You don't really get action against T-34-85s as often. In fact, it's kind of a rarity. You get it in a full down tier. Yeah, sure, that's one thing. But if you're going to consider a tank's armor, you don't want to consider it against its easiest opponent. You want to consider it against something that it's on par with, or at a disadvantage to see how it exactly performs. You can see that the Centurion Action 10 has pretty crappy armor, to be honest. So if you combine shit mobility, shit armor, and an overall not really punchy gun, sure, it's got good pen, but one of the things that it lacks is the ability to one-shot. And the ability to one-shot means that you have to constantly peek your opponent. If you're peeking multiple opponents, you're peeking multiple guns constantly, and constantly risking your tank getting shot up. And so, if you don't make that first kill, it's highly unlikely that you will actually get the kill if there is more than one target to shoot at you. Obviously, that's not always going to happen, and it's kind of bad tanking if you put yourself in a situation like that, but things like that are going to happen. And a tank that is slow should, in theory, rely on its armor, or its gun. And in this case, it can't really rely on its gun to be punchy. If you want to be punchy, you're going to have to do it with a group of friends, and we all know how teamwork is in War Thunder. It doesn't really exist, although I really encourage everyone to work as hard as you can with your teammates, because it's just rewarding, to be honest. Regardless, you have to be really careful, and you have to be kind of sheepish when you play the Centurion Action X. It's not really the same when you play the STRV-81. You can sort of run and gun, and you'll see that in the clip that is upcoming. I managed to take out this ASU, and I will get the PT-76, and then I'll get taken out from the side. You see, obviously I put myself in a bad position, but this hull armor is still extremely weak. It's a Centurion hull, and this is something that runs in common with all Centurions. Now, let's go to this clip here. I'm in the STRV-81, which is it is identical to the Centurion Action X, except for one thing. It has a better turret, well, two things. It has a better turret, and it has SS-11s, or RB-52s. And it's got three of them. You see, in this case here, I'm not even going to bother using the RB-52s. I'm going to use the gun, and I'll show you exactly how the gun and armor play together. You can see I am engaging a single target that is not engaging me, and that is the way that you should play your Centurions. You should not be taking shots, because this thing is actually extremely vulnerable. You shouldn't be corner peeking. You shouldn't be corner peeking multiple enemies. You should be engaging things with a group of friends. You should sort of wait for your T-29s, T-34s to be doing the tanking, and then hit them from where they're not expecting, or hitting them from a weird angle. The gun damage, I find, at least on Russian tanks, is actually good enough. And this is for one thing. The Russian tanks are stacked together. They're very, very tightly packed. Their components are very tightly packed together. And so, if you're going to shoot them, you're probably going to damage more than one component. In the case of the German tanks, they're spaced out until you get to the Leopard 1. And even then, you still have large tanks like the M48 Patton 2 that are really, or Patton 3 rather, that are really well spaced out. And if you get a one-shot, consider yourself lucky. Unless you hit the ammo rack, of course, then consider yourself extremely smart. The STRV-81 is really good for picking apart tanks, mostly because of the turret armor. And you'll see that the turret armor on the STRV is kind of what does it for me. I feel a lot more confident going into engagements, even though the armor is not as strong. There are fewer weak spots or fewer weakened areas that really hold you back. And of course, people are scared of you because they're seeing those RB-52s. Honestly, you can see there, first shot, I just eat it. T-44. You see, that is when you come across the 85mm gun, and this is when it will save you. There are cases, and I just took another shot from a King Tiger. I'm going to go for the lower front plate, and I'm going to take out every single crew member. You have to get super lucky to get shots like that, and I did. So I'm going to put that one down to luck, and I'm going to put that one there down to skill. So, what am I doing right in the Centurion that I'm doing wrong in the Action X? And the answer is nothing. I am playing this the way I should play it, and I will play the Centurion Action X the way I should play it, which is a lot more sheepishly. And you can see I've taken a shot from the side, and I'm down to 3 crew. I have a feeling that if I had done that in the Action X, I probably would have died. Maybe it's because I'm unlucky. Maybe I'm just an unlucky ducky. But you can see that there's some magic in the STRV-81 that just makes it really good. Another 85mm gun doesn't quite do it for him, and I take him out in a single shot. Remember, the Russian tanks are going to be easy ones. The hard ones are going to be the German ones, because they're spaced out. And that is where the challenge lies. If you can come up against the Russians, you're going to have a fun time. But for the most part, if you can get shots on German tanks and take at least one shot, then you're good. In a 1v1, if you don't disable the gunner in the first go, then you're okay. You'll survive. But in the Action X, you can't just run out and take a shot to the face, because you will die, because it just doesn't have the armor. And you can see I'm just tanking shots like you wouldn't believe from long 88s that I just couldn't do in the Action X. There we go. I take, and then I receive, and then I give. It's just so simple and so easy that I can just do it all day, every day, and I can just sit here and grab King Tigers as they leave their spawn. I find, in my opinion, the STRV to be the better pick, just because it has such better turret armor, and that is where it really sells itself for me. It's not even the ATGMs. It's not even I don't know. It's just the turret. Honestly, it is probably one of the better tanks that you can pick up as a premium. And if you're looking for something that is fairly strong, but not overpowered, the STRV-81 is actually a decent pick. I wouldn't say it's overpowered because of the missiles. I honestly just think that it's one of those things that just gives it a bit of flavor. If you're, struggling, maybe against a mouse, yes, it's OP, and it does give it a little bit more of a powerful thing there. Is it pay to win? I don't really think so. I think it's just kind of cool and a bit memey, because they are actually fairly hard to control when you're new. Maybe I need some more practice. Maybe I'm bad. Maybe I need to improve myself. But for the most part, I would pick the STRV-81 over the Action X. I find the Action X to be a bit of a struggle bus, to be honest. I don't really find it to be terribly strong. I don't really find it to be terribly aggressive. You have to be really sheepish, and for a tank that doesn't really have the mobility, that's not really something I like in a tank. And out of personal preference, I would honestly pick the STRV-81. It's just overall better. I don't know what else to say, but it is just overall better. Anyway, ladies and gents, thank you very much for watching. Obviously, if you don't want to buy these tanks, don't buy them at all. But in case you do, I'm glad to have made this little buying guide for you. I wouldn't, maybe, sure, if it's 50% off, if you get a 75% discount, it's a nice little tank to add to your lineup. I would kind of treat it like an FV4202, but a little bit worse. But honestly, it's just there. It's if you're looking for a challenge like I am, I'm always up for a challenge. I think the Centurion Action X is okay for that. But at the same time, I think it should be buffed. Now, I don't think it... maybe it should be reduced to 6.3. Maybe not. I don't know. Discuss that in the comments. Let me know. And do be polite, please, because I am just a humble opinion farmer, farming everybody's opinions and seeing what everyone on the internet thinks. But I do think it should get some sort of improvement to it. Maybe it should get an increased reload rate. Maybe the reload rate should be 6.3 seconds instead of 6.7 seconds, or maybe it should be 6 seconds flat. I don't know. Let's discuss in the comments, because I don't think the STRV 81... I think the STRV 81 is just too good a premium to buy over the Action X, and I don't think the Action X will end up being as popular. I think there should be some sort of reason to go and buy it, and I honestly don't see why an increased reload, or a decreased reload rather, would do it any harm. Anyway, ladies and gents, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.